Second. Okay. Well, here we are this afternoon with at the 2021 Girlfriend Weekend Zoomathon Slumber Party Book Club Convention. And I am welcoming Shari Stauch, who's the owner of Main Street Reads, who has all of her authors here. And she's going to be introducing them. But that is a wonderful looking tiara. I just have to say, I really love it. It looks great. And we've been sharing everybody order your books from Main Street Reads because this is our official vendor. She's built a virtual Pulpwood Queen bookstore on her site, and you can give instruction on that a little bit more if you want to too, Shari. So go ahead, you're on.
All right, great. So first I need to start out, of course, with some housekeeping. Thank you, Kathy. I was reading, I'm reading Bullet Journal. Probably a lot of you are familiar with it, but it's really fun. And as serendipity would have it, because there's no such thing as coincidence, I came upon a passage last night and I copied out just a quick bit of it that I wanted to read to you guys. Keep company with those you find inspiring, motivating, and constructively challenging. Ask yourself, what can I learn from them? Is this world a better place because they're in my life? Do they make me want to be a better person? Kathy, you are that person for me, as well as everyone on my panel today, as well as all of the Pulpwood Queens. I can't even tell you how much you guys lift me up. So this is going to be a super fun panel because what I wanted to talk about with my brilliant authors is a little bit about character arcs and that darkness to light that we experience in real life and in our characters. And I have with me today the lovely Scott Boyer. Scott, shout, yell hi.
Hey there.
And the equally lovely Joe Palmer. There he is. And the adorable dancing Gregory Phillips.
Hello. Good to see everyone.
I have more men than women. And my sweet, sweet Chicago pal, Ruthie Landis.
Yay! Love this.
I know it's going to be great. So we're not going to do PowerPoints or any of that kind of nonsense today. We really want to get kind of conversational about this theme about character and darkness to light and arcs. So I'm going to ask a couple of opening questions, and then we're going to let this conversation flow. So I'm going to start with Ruthie as my sole female on the panel besides me, and the person that writes nonfiction. Her books, Beyond the Book Club, last year's pick, and this year, Acting Lessons for Living, are wonderful. They're inspiring. They encourage journaling. Love every bit of them. And so, Ruthie, your newest work deals a lot with masks, how we use them to self-protect, how we put masks on for other folks. Is that because we're frightened to drop those masks? Talk about that a little bit for me.
Yes, yeah. You know, first of all, I want to say that in the book, because I'm using sort of the structure of the theater and film, and so one of the first chapters is about pausing before entering and pausing before exiting. It's called Entrances and Exits. And last night, when I had to introduce my books, I didn't walk the talk, and I didn't pause before entering. I felt pressed and I didn't feel present. And I was so aware of how when I don't pause and breathe and get intentional, I think the masks come up automatically. And then I'm not speaking from my heart. I'm not speaking from my most authentic self. So your question was about because we're afraid. So, I work with something which I have worked with writers and actors over the years, and of course, as a therapist with all my clients, with a model called the Enneagram. And how I work with the Enneagram is a little different than people out there. It's an ancient model of points of view, but it really is a map of people, characters, path or arc to self-mastery. And so what we have to begin with is the premise that so there are 9 numbers on the Enneagram, and I really, that's one of my gifts for the auction, is a session with me working with the Enneagram. But the premise is that we all want something that we think we don't have, that we're coming from a place of lacking, right? And of course, in a hero's journey, they sort of come to find out that they always had it, that it always was sort of living inside of them. But here they are, they're wanting something that they don't have. And it kind of breaks down into either security, empowerment, or a sense of worth or value. Okay. And nobody wants to show that to anybody, really. Like, nobody wants to say, like in my, I'm a heart type, and that is a type that is looking to validate their worth somehow, because there's this secret thinking they don't have worth. And that secret they don't want to reveal. So they put on a mask. And that mask comes in the form of behaviors and strategies that they think they're using to get what they want. But actually, because they're so afraid of revealing their secrets in their most honest place, they create the dragons or the conflict that lies within them. And I will go as far as to say the shadow that lies within them, and that becomes projected in the world outside of them.
Okay.
And
I want to break in here and move that over to move this over to Joe, because I think Joe's book, A Mariner's Tale. Can you hear me, Joe?
Yeah, hear you loud and clear.
So definitely both your main characters have that darkness to light arc, and very much what Ruthie was saying about, having those masks on and the shadow and stuff. Did you did you choose to do that initially when you were writing about them, or did that kind of just emerge as you went? And talk a little bit about how those two central characters helped each other to drop those masks and experience an arc.
I didn't start out thinking when I started writing A Mariner's Tale, it got to start out sitting on my boat one afternoon. We have this old antique sailboat that I just sold. And so I'm doing some work on it one afternoon. And I heard a song on the stereo I was listening to by Mark Knopfler. It's about an old guy who builds his own boat and sails all over the world. And now he's deaf. And I started thinking about that song. And I thought, what a good story there is in this song. And so I went home that night and started writing a story about this lonely old sailor who has had some tragedy in his life that he's trying to recover from. And I just sort of pieced it together as I went. Mm-hmm. I used my background for the darkness. I came from a home that was very bad. My father was a very abusive tyrant bully. And as I started writing about my protagonist, Jack Merkel, I started writing about the father that I never had, that I'd always wanted. But he has a tragic past also. And so as I was developing that, I'm thinking to myself, sometimes when we're working through our own problems, we find that we stumble across somebody else who's also working on their own problems. And sometimes you go it alone, sometimes you go it together. But I think it's oftentimes when you're going it together that you really start to make progress. And so I probably was 2 or 3 chapters into it before I really realized, this is what I want. That's the arc that I wanted to follow.
Okay. And so I'm going to move to you next, Gregory. Gregory's book is not out yet. It is the newest book, I should say. He has 2 brilliant books out prior to this. I'll let him talk about it a little bit. But this one, I think, is my favorite. It's coming out later this year from Lucid House Publishing. And A Season in Lights kind of deals with the theater, which keying in on Ruthie's bit. Yeah. So, but deals with both the story of, AIDS kind of in the 80s, and then what we've been dealing with the last year with COVID-19. Gregory, can you talk a little bit about the extra challenges, if there were any or not, in writing this in terms of the character arcs, against the backdrop of these critical times for us?
Sure. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to be here again. Many of you will remember me from Love of Finished Years and The Exile, both of which were Pulpwood Queen selections. And as Shari said, A Season of Lights will be coming out later this year. It was the way that this novel came about was very interesting, because I wrote most of it before the COVID-19 outbreak. And then I've updated it, over the last year, because it felt like a very natural thing to incorporate. And as Shari mentioned, there's sort of 2 stories in parallel. One taking place in 1980s New York City, one taking place currently. And it was very organic, really, how the parallels between the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and COVID currently tied in and shaped the 2 main characters, and how they were affected by these things. For me, the circumstances and the characters really almost wrote the story themselves. It was not an intentional darkness to light type of arc. It was these characters reacting to the events around them, and that made it really, really fun to put it together, and also just took it in directions that I didn't necessarily expect the novel to go when I started it.
Excellent. And Scott, so I'm gonna, last but definitely not least, I think that you have a little bit of a different situation in your books. Bob Ether and the Jade Academy, followed by Temple of Eternity. Now the 3rd one is in the works, right? About ready to publish. And then there's a 4th beyond that, we know. So you have, I think, maybe the luxury of time, or maybe not so much. Talk to me a little bit about how your characters are experiencing their arcs. Are you taking them through several books? I've noticed, obviously some growth in some of the characters. I love all the characters. It's hard to choose a favorite, but talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So first of all, hi. Hi, Shari. Hi, Kathy. So you guys, I'm going to liven it up a little bit. I got my Captain America jammies. There's even a little Captain America on the pants. So I'm in the spirit here. You guys might have seen me jumping in and off some of these calls, yesterday and today. I'm trying to participate as much as possible. But yeah, thank you for that question. The character arcs and the development of my characters is truthfully, it's kind of followed my own arc as an author. I started writing Jade Academy 10 years ago, and my mindset was, was more juvenile. The intent was to write something really, suited for younger kids. It was even kind of originally idealized or pictured as maybe middle grade. And so as the stories have progressed, they have developed, as has my writing. So, this, the first book, Jade Academy, takes place largely in Tibet. And Bobby's journey is his own journey, but he's also with a whole group of friends. So there's the group dynamic that comes into play quite a bit. And in the second book, he's trying to rescue a lot of those friends, those same friends, and he's partnered with his young buddy Jinx, and that makes it much more of a partnership dynamic. And so the arc is more about that partnership and their friendship, the best friend friendship, as opposed to the group dynamic. And then as the series moves on, yeah, book 3, the second one takes place in Guatemala. It's Mayan temples and a lot of adventure there. We move into Egypt in the third book, and it really does change as Bobby and Jinx and the rest of the characters are now more mature. They've aged a couple years, and they're ready to go off and maybe take on some responsibilities of their own, sort of maybe not adult, but right on the cusp of adulthood. And so, yeah, their arc has transformed over the course of the series.
Let me switch things up on you a little bit. I'm going to give you all and if you'd each talk about this a little bit. So how has writing these arcs, these characters, the growth of them changed each of you? Anyone can jump in first. Surprise.
Well, I'll jump in. So in my book, so I'm so jealous of all the amazing novelists. And, this morning when Kathy started, she said that books had, changed her life, that they had saved her, that they had healed her. And, being a person who heals, it's like, oh, I wish I could do it in that way, like where people could read these stories and see their own arc reflected back to them, but maybe not personalize it. In my particular book, I guess, the main character is the audience reading it, and me, like that we're the mirrors of each other. And I don't know what the reader's experience is. I hope it will change them. I hope it will make them feel like they can take a bow at the end of their lives for living a really well-lived life using some of these ideas and concepts of the hero's journey. For me, how it changed me was first of all, it allowed me to heal and integrate a life I kind of begun to leave behind as an actor and claim my own story more and not be ashamed of it. And, made myself more aware of what I tried to teach and hold my feet to the fire around that. I think when you're writing a self-development book, and the ones I'm working on right now, if I don't feel like that I'm in alignment with the path of the book, then I feel like a hypocrite, right? Because I'm the main character of the book, and so is the reader. And so I noticed that as I'm working on this next one, I'm not in alignment, but these last 3 books, it's made me walk my talk more.
I can tell you guys that this is for Ruthie. This is so very true, because when she's not in alignment, you can totally feel it because she stalls and stalls and stalls. And when she is in alignment, all of a sudden you've got a book done in 6 weeks. It's like what have you been doing? Do you sleep? But once it's in there, and then it's just got to come out of you, right? I think that's amazing.
Well, I think it's true. And I, was thinking about all the magic that's been being talked about. And then in Scott's book, the magic, right? And for me, when I'm not in alignment, I can't open the channels to the collective consciousness, to the universe, because I'm obstructing it. I'm my own obstacle. And when I can get it in alignment, I just sit down and I'm not even really sure who wrote the book. It's just, I'm out of the way, so it can just come down through me. And I know, that Scott has talked about the spirituality that he brings into his books. And it shows through the creative force in me. I guess that's how it does.
Well, with Scott, have these changed you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that really is the whole process. So real briefly, I mean, what prompted me to write these books is I grew up reading fantasy and I loved fantasy. And then later in life, I got into spiritual fiction, books like Siddhartha, Life of Pi, Celestine Prophecy, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And those books, I always felt like they changed me in some way. You know, I would finish those books and you feel like there was a powerful message there for you to absorb. And it was really just up to the reader to kind of uncover that kernel, that lesson that's there. And what set me on the journey as an author is that I wanted to read a book that had that kind of deep message that would, you know, I would feel like I grew from, but also had the fun, fast-paced, adventure style that I had grown up loving and reading, all the fantasy novels. So yeah, one of the first things that happened to me was I had to figure out what messages, what lessons I wanted to put into these stories, because it wasn't, just there out there in the open. The story had to tell me. And so throughout the stories, there's messages about, the interconnectedness of all things. It's funny, you mentioned right at the start of this whole thing that nothing happened. Everything happens for a reason. There's no such thing as coincidence. That's a major theme in my books, but it's something that I had to internalize and accept and believe both before I ever started writing and throughout the process. And so a lot of the themes, the interconnectedness of all things, the bond between family and friends, the ethical and moral dilemmas that my characters face are all things that, similar, I think, to what Ruthie was saying, I've had to internalize and really walk that walk and believe in these things before I can express them in the books.
Oh, very good. I can tell you Celestine Prophecy changed me too. I definitely started hugging a lot of trees. I have that book to blame for many, many slivers. So Eric, how about you? What's changed? What's changed in you with this journey?
Are you calling on me? I wasn't sure. Okay.
Sorry, Gregory.
Yeah. I feel like one of the themes of my novel, and just really, I'll give you a really quick summary of it in case you weren't on the call last night. My new novel, it's a story of passion, ambition, and escape set in the colorful, artistic underworld of off-Broadway New York. And one of the themes of the novel is appreciating the little moments, the journey, not necessarily and realizing that the beauty in the steps along the way. And for some of the characters who are in the performing arts, that's difficult for them because they're always looking for the next big thing, the next big show, the next big success. And it's only in looking back that they realize that the joy and the happiness was in some of the steps along the way. And that's definitely been a lesson to me, especially over the last year during the lockdown and quarantine and all the things we've been having to deal with because of COVID, is I've absorbed that lesson of appreciating the little things, finding joy in the moments along the way, even when you don't know what the future may hold. So I would say that, my characters taught me a thing or two in those lessons.
Outstanding. Very much so. And Joe, how about you?
When everything was said and done, mine forced me to step back and take a look at my life as an overall picture instead of a series of just random events, pieces that didn't even say, oh, you got a puzzle piece here, but it doesn't fit with this one. Well, yeah, if you turn it the other way, it does. So I had to see myself as a whole person instead of a bunch of busted up little pieces. And this helped me to do that. the overall theme of my story is hope in the face of just the worst kind of adversity. And when I was, to give you an example, when I was in the hospital 3 years ago, recovering from a double coronary bypass surgery, which was loads of fun. And about 3 days out, a friend of mine, by then I got my iPhone back in my hand and I'm doped up sending iPhone messages to people. But a friend of mine sends me a message, and she's Zen Buddhist and she's very calm. And if she speaks 4 words in a day, she's talking a lot. She sent me a 4-word message that said, "Don't push the river." And I thought about it and I thought, wow, that's pretty heavy. Don't push the river. And I went and looked it up, and the rest of the proverb is, it flows by itself. And it's true. You know, your life is going to be what it is. Now, sure, you can make some alterations, and you know, and of course, that's what I did with my characters. I altered things along the way, just as we do in real life. But everything that happens, even the really, really bad stuff, and of course, this was a discovery process for me. That my actual, you know, I think, you know, people say we write to figure ourselves out. Well, it's true. And by the time I'd gotten through the end of mine, I had not figured myself out. And one of the, somebody wrote a review recently that I thought was, what was really cool about it was the reviewer said something about it showing that all these damaged little parts of our lives, even though we look at them and say, well, I would never do that again, or I would never do that again, or I would never do that again. But what if you could go back and didn't do that? Where would it lead you? And her comment was that all these little things that happen in our lives bring us to some sort of totality. And I think, as she put it, it was just the brutal fairness of the cosmos that things work out that way. That, you know, it's all for a purpose. And my characters led me along to a place where, you know, I'm happy where they are and I'm happy where I am. And it made me a better writer too.
Very good. All right. So keying on that, I know that we've all had a very surreal year. Talk about, just tell us one, I'm going to start with you, Scott, because I know you've got a couple. What's been your most surreal, accepting COVID, moment in your book signings, craziest publishing, writing, book club moment to date?
Yeah. So I've had a couple. One of them was walking into a bookstore and seeing my book on the shelf and telling the lady behind the desk, you know, I'm the author, I'm here to sign them. She said, great. She got out some pens. She brought them over to me. I opened up the cover and it was a philosophical treatise on like Rene Descartes, or, you know, something about Leonardo da Vinci. I could not really understand. I consider myself a fairly bright guy, but it was a misprint, obviously, but they'd taken some kind of deeply, very heavy read and put my cover on it. And I was like, this is not a kid's book by any means.
You had your own inverted Jenny. I love it.
Yeah. But the one that stands out the most, and the one that I honestly take the most pleasure from, I actually carry the picture around, it's saved on my photo album, is my mother passed along a copy of my book to a good friend of hers who gave it to her young son to read. And her son was, I think, 9 years old at the time. And he started reading it, and the mother noticed that he was scared by the story. And so she said to him, she said, okay, well, maybe we should, you know, take this, maybe we should set it aside for right now. You know, can go on and read something else. So she took the book, she put it on his bookshelf, and she just assumed that he had, you know, proceeded to go and read, you know, other stuff. I think it was about a week or 2 weeks later, she came into the bedroom and found him under the sheets with a flashlight, reading my book, you know, underneath the sheets. And she said, you know, what are you doing? She said, I thought that we had agreed that you know, you would set this aside and you'd come back to it when you weren't scared. And he goes, yeah, I know. And she said, well, are you still scared? And he goes, yeah, I'm still scared, but I really like it. You know, I want to keep reading. That same kid, and that was dear to me. That was precious, as I can't even put it in words. But was even more amazing to me. A couple months later, I got a picture passed to me from my mother, from this young boy's mother, who had taken his yearbook photo for his elementary school, and underneath they're asked, you know, to provide some details about themselves, and it asks for favorite author, and he had listed me as his favorite author.
Oh,
And yeah, I couldn't help but just get teary over that. Like I said, I've still got it. So those were both quite surreal for very, very different reasons, obviously.
Awesome. And Gregory, how about you?
Well, you know, I have, since my book isn't out yet, I haven't been, you know, I've been laying pretty low during this last year. This is kind of my first event in a little while, which is a lot of fun. The surreal thing for me is kind of just watching how things have developed since I finished the book. I finished the draft of the ending that is now the ending of the book at the end of March, beginning of April of last year. So I really wrote the conclusion of the book actually during the time that it was supposed to be happening, the very beginning of the COVID lockdown. And at a few times since then, I thought about maybe continuing it, writing a little bit more to bring it a little bit more current. And I decided not to, because I felt like looking back on it, it was a surreal moment for me to read back on what I'd written at that time, March, April 2020, still not knowing so much of what would happen, and putting that into the characters' voices. And so I ended up feeling like I like it better that it was finished with a lot of information still in the air, so the readers, I think when you read it, you'll feel a little bit it will feel a little bit surreal, I believe. And also, having talked to so many people, friends of mine who are in the performing arts who've been affected by it, I feel like the experiences of those characters really reflect what a lot of people were feeling at exactly that time.
How about you, Ruthie? Surreal moments?
Well, I'm going to just say one fast one, and then I think they're both pretty fast. One was, I was doing a book signing in Beaufort at Nevermore just recently, and it was, for me, not that cold, you know, being from Chicago, it was kind of okay. But the bookstore is small and tight, and she kind of wanted to put me back in the corner, and I'm like going, COVID, I don't really want to be in there. I said, couldn't I just set up a table out front, you know, in front of the store, and it'll bring people into the store? And she said, okay. And she got a table, and we set up, and everybody just kept walking past me, not realizing, I think, that it was a book signing, even though I had books all over the table, until finally one person said to me, "You're crazy." And I looked at her and I thought about it. I thought, yeah, I really am kind of crazy. And I said, I guess if you're an author, you got to be kind of crazy. So that was a really strange moment, I must admit. The second one, though, is that in my book, I talk a lot, you know, in terms of the hero's journey and stuff, about synchronicity, and about that, you know, what is that quote, you know, by Goethe, like, once you make a decision to do something, then the universe conspires to support you. And I feel like that's been happening a lot. Lots of synchronistic, magical things. My two really close friends died right when it was published. And And I feel like they're like orchestrating like some strange magical moments for me since then, connecting me to people that I wouldn't be connected to.
Excellent. Joe, any surreal moments?
The biggest surreal moment was being invited to be a guest speaker at the Pat Conroy Literary Festival.
Oh, yeah.
This, I got to step back a moment. I love the festival. I love the center. I love everybody. It's Jonathan, Marley, everybody. They've been so good to me. I wouldn't be where I am right now. I had a novel and I was working on it and I had a rough draft and I went to the very first Pat Conroy Literary Festival and I fell into it by happenstance because I wrote a guest column for the local newspaper here for 10 years or so called Cup of Joe. And if you've ever read Louis Grizzard's, the columnist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, of course, he's dead now. I decided I would write a column like that. And it was just folksy humor. I would tell truths, partial truths. I would varnish the facts, but I wrote this really folksy column here for 10 years and it had a big following. And I wrote 2 columns about Pat Conroy. One was about his influence on me as a Southern writer. And the other one was a eulogy of him after he died. It was, I think the title of it was Farewell to the Prince of Words. And I got a copy. I sent a copy of those to Marley after Pat died because I wanted to just contribute them to give them to the family. I thought, well, they'd like to have family keepsakes. But because of that, it established a relationship between me and her and the center. And all of a sudden, I've got all these wonderful people in my life. And Marley's not actually my agent, but she's my Sherpa, my fairy godmother. She took me all the way from, the very beginnings of this up until publication. And that was my dream. My dream was I've been to every single one of those conferences. I tell people I'm a plank holder. It was the realization of a dream for me. It's almost important to me as having written a novel was to be honored to be able to do that. It was just a huge honor and I just can't. I'm just so indebted. I'm giving away the ship's bell off of my sailboat to the center for the auction they're having.
That's great.
Yeah, the bell is very near and dear to me. My youngest son gave it to me to put on our sailboat years ago, and I just sold my sailboat last week, and I didn't want to let this bell go, but at the same time, I thought, this is a really worthy cause, and so I'm doing this. But yes, the surreal moment for me was being invited to the Pat Conroy Literary Festival as a guest speaker.
Well, I'm going to switch gears on you now. So why is the color? So, obviously everyone said brilliant things about your book. Cassandra King Conroy gave you a phenomenal blurb, which is wonderful, but nobody talks about this. Why are there so many references to the color green?
Because anybody here was raised Catholic besides me? You can hide after you say it. Okay. So you remember from your catechism classes way back the 3 virtues, faith, hope, and charity. Well, hope, the color of faith is white. The color charity, of course, is red for caritas. And then hope is always portrayed as green. So when I started writing this story, I just like the color green. And, I'm just enamored of all the beautiful Spartina grass. And I love the way to watch it go from just sort of this yellowish to by midsummer, it's just so vivid green, it hurts your eyeballs. And so I just love the color green and I'm just filling up everything, green, 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 green. And at some point I'm thinking, am I overdoing it with all this green? Why am I putting all this green in here? And all of a sudden, I was sitting down one day thinking about it when I realized, you know, where my story was going. And I started thinking about the hope these characters were trying to find, the purpose they were trying to find, you know, to escape from all the pain and the bitterness, and to achieve hope, or they needed to have some hope to get to where they were going. And all of a sudden it hit me, wow, hope, that's the color green. Holy cow, that's what I've been following around my whole life. And so I did a little research, and this is where it gets really weird. I went online and looked up, there's a university, there's a Catholic college up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It's called Marywood. And on the campus, there is a cathedral. In the dome of the cathedral, there's this beautiful, beautiful mural. I don't know if you can all see this really good or not. Sitting over here, dressed in green robes, is the angel representing hope. The cherub sitting beside her is holding a ship's anchor.
Ooh, love it.
Which, yeah, a ship's anchor. I mean, a mariner's tale, a ship's anchor, green. And of course, the anchor is the symbol for strength and constancy. So that's what this whole thing was about. And at that point, I decided I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to continue it. I don't want to overdo it, but I just continued it all the way through and following it all the way up to the end. And the spoilers here, but
Scott, you look like you had something to add to that, Mr. J over there. No?
I mean, I was honestly just vibing with him. As you know, the first book, The Jade Academy, I mean, jade comes in multiple colors, but green is the predominant color for jade. And it plays a predominant role throughout my books as well. The second book takes place in Guatemala. We have this Mayan temple. It's all tropical jungle. So a big portion of Bobby and Jinx's adventures, they're in, you know, this tree, they're in that tree, they're, you know, they're in the middle of a rainstorm, they're in the middle of, you know, one thing after another, they're crawling through a fallen log. So similar to Joe, I think I was doing a lot of research on the plants and the trees that were native to that area, making sure that I had, you know, I wasn't putting the wrong types of trees in the wrong type of environment, but coming up with all the different ways to describe tropical jungle and rainforest and, you know, and all this sort of thing was a big part of the research that went into my second book. So yeah, there's quite a bit of green in there too.
I love that. Okay, research. So Gregory, I know that you do a lot of research for your work too. I know, especially in Love of Finished Years, all the historical research that went into that. But in the newest book coming out, a lot of that, you had a lot of that as yourself, because it's about, you know, the dancers in the theater, and you came from that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, sorry, just started coughing as soon as you called on me. So yes, this book was very personal for me because it really drew on a lot of my own life experiences. Excuse me. So I live in Seattle. I'm a dancer. I've danced professionally for many years. And I lived in New York for about 1.5 years and danced in a few off-Broadway shows when I was there. And so that really played into the story. It's not necessarily based on my own experiences as much as inspired by them. So the primary character in the novel, Cammie, she, similar to my experience, she moved to New York, wanting to make it as a dancer, kind of scraping for whatever gigs she could find. And a lot of the characters that she encounters in the theater are, again, inspired by people that I've run into. You know, they're very, very colorful, very just diverse. And it was really fun to just put some of those anecdotes of backstage, the interaction between the characters, the performers. And while there was some research involved, it was it didn't take as much research as my previous two novels, because it was so based on my own life experiences, and it was really fun to kind of create that world.
Oh, very good. So Ruthie and Gregory definitely have to have some offline conversations about theater. Ruthie, your companion books, can you tell me a little bit about, because I think that we've had this conversation before, you and me. I think that they have particular value to writers and to playwrights and to actors. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of master classes, with actors and writers of all kinds over the years, and kind of using all the methodology of ways in which characters develop for an actor apply to how you can be consistent with your character development, in any form of writing at all. Um, because I taught acting, and because now I'm a therapist, so I use all kinds of experiential learning. I'm a body-centered psychotherapist, so I use the body, I use creativity, and I use a lot of theater techniques with my clients. So I think when I was teaching actors, I was also teaching actors not only how to be believable on stage, but how to be better people, how the characters that met them actually were interfacing with them at a very specific time in their life where they needed to learn something from that character. And I think that if I flip that over to the writer, using theater techniques, like you're all talking about, the story spoke to you, or a character tells you it should go another way. So one of the things that I always did with actors would be that I would do a gestalt, which is chair work, where I'd have the actor talk to the character and then tell the character what they appreciated about them, or where they thought there were gaps between them and the character they were about to play. And then I'd have them jump into the other chair and have the character speak back to them and say, well, this is why you're perfect to play me. And in a writing class, it's, well, this is why you're perfect to write me, because you have this and you have that. And it's like this relationality between that which the imagination wants to produce, as well as what we were talking about earlier about how we want to grow. And I guess I just keep coming back to the Enneagram because, I've been working with it for 25 years, and I have seen it just change writers' lives and certainly actors' lives as well, because it gives them a kind of bones to stay within so that they stay true.
Excellent. All right, so I want a few minutes for any questions from folks. So what we're going to do now is just, if each of you would just 30 seconds or less, tell us the biggest takeaway from your book and what book clubs are loving about it, or are going to love most about it, or the books as a whole. Scott, we're going to start with you, baby.
Okay. So yeah, what people in book clubs in general, what the biggest takeaway, what most people tend to notice about the books is they're fast paced, they're fun, they're adventure style, right? So they're Harry Potter, Percy Jackson kind of mixed with Indiana Jones. But sort of the big takeaway that I hope and I want people to get from them is that there's another layer beyond them. And there is a sense of depth. There's a sense of purpose behind the characters, their actions, their spirituality. There is development within them. So, within the books we have, especially this second book, and then on to the third, a reimagining of several ancient myths and legends. So Temple of Eternity is sort of a reimagining of the Fountain of Youth. And if that myth really did exist, what it might look like and what it how it could exist in today, and how my characters, then go on to interact with it. And the big takeaway is to open up the imagination to possibilities, both in terms of the story and the spirituality, the development, the growth that could actually be real. So it's not, Ruthie mentioned earlier magic. Very early in the series, I established there's no such thing as magic. The idea is, let's go beyond our own selves, what exists in the normal world, but to the paranormal. And that is, I think, one of the biggest takeaways. The fun, fast-paced, but with a sense of metaphysics or paranormal spirituality, if you will.
Excellent. And the energy, manipulating that energy, the anima. I love it. I mean, I'm so hooked on this series, I can't even tell you. All right, Joe, biggest takeaway.
Oh, just in the last few days, there's an Irish book club. It's called the Rick O'Shea Book Club online. It's a Facebook group, and I joined it way back when because some Irish friends of mine, they've gotten a hold of my book, and they're starting to talk about it on their Irish book club page. And golly, I mean, that's awesome. But the thing that they really like about, first of all, Irish people love Southern fiction. So if you can find some way to fit something Irish into your Southern fiction book, you might get some attention. But anyway, they like, what they really like about it is the vividness, because I sort of paint word pictures, with my characters, and so that's the big thing for me right now is I set out to do that, and all of a sudden here's this group of people who are very well read, and they're very thrilled that I actually went to Ireland to do the research, and I just gave it to my friends over there for that particular chapter and said, have at it, tear it up, make it right. But that's the takeaway that they're talking about is it, as one of them said, it was like opening up a door and just walking into a room, and all of a sudden I was part of the party.
Excellent.
So that to me feels very good. That's great affirmation. It really is.
Excellent. Ruthie?
So it's easy to come back to what you said. So even in Beyond the Book Club, and now with Acting Lessons for Living and then the accompanying guided journal and activities book, it's the embodiment of the book. It's not just talking about it, but giving people activities and prompts to be able to embody what they are learning from the book. And I hear over and over again that it enlivens the book clubs, that, when people are kind of stalled and, and talking in circles, that, having these journal prompts and activities that kind of make people get it all the way through. And also, I think that these activities that they're sharing and then processing through also lets people get more intimate with each other, get more real with each other, and really deepens their sense of community in the book clubs.
Very much so. Both Jonathan Hout at the Pat Conroy Literary Center and Wiley Cash, very prominent author that runs the Southern Reader Meet Writer virtual events, are, commented on that what can we do? And I think about it too as a bookseller, is what can we do to deepen the experience of the book club participants? Yes, wine is necessary, that's fine, but how do we get to those deeper conversations? And I think that your book and the activities in that facilitate that beautifully. So yay you. And Gregory, what's the big takeaway?
There's going to be several takeaways from my book. One of the original things that I wanted to portray and give readers and book clubs as a takeaway was sort of the glimpse behind the curtain into the theater world, and not the big Broadway, big professional world, but more the kind of the small time players in the kind of the underground theater community. And so I think that that's going to be a fun takeaway for people. Then as the book developed, and I began to work on the parallels between the portion that's set in the 80s and the portion set today, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for reflection and discussion on these two parallel pandemics that were portrayed in the novel, and that I think took it to a deeper level and forced my characters to go deeper. And I think it will force, or allow readers and book clubs to dive into a deeper level with this novel.
Outstanding. Yeah, you cannot get more than 10 pages into Gregory's novel without starting to sing Billy Joel's Piano Man. I'm just fair warning. It's going to be stuck in your head for months. It's been stuck in my head ever since I started reading the book. Okay, so any questions out there, folks? Want to open it up? Unmute yourself if you have a question for this awesome group of authors.
Hi, it's Steve Manchester. I just wanted to say I really, really enjoyed this session. Thank you all for
Oh.
sharing. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can
Hi.
I say something? Can I build on that for a second? I loved your presentation yesterday, Stephen. And in my book, I kind of talk about a little bit like the menu, and that's that there's a soul seed we're born with, and it has a kind of script in it. But at any point that we want to break through that script, we might just have a chance to do a rewrite on it.
That's
And,
awesome. I love that.
So I really loved hearing about your book. It just sounds
Thank you.
great.
That's mutual. Thank you so much.
Someone else had a question?
I just wanted to say to all the authors here that, all of your stories play out visually in my mind, but being a big film and theater buff, I can see, Scott's as a series on Netflix. I can see what you're doing, Ruthie, and what you're doing, Gregory, with everything that's happened with Broadway and theater. I think it's important that we have books like yours that kind of can fill in the gap until we sort out what's going to happen in the theater world. Yeah. I've had some background in community theater. It's, not even off Broadway, but it's always been a big part of my family's life. So I love this panel and the dynamics. And Joe, that bell is awesome. If y'all don't go to the, I'm just thinking that would be a great way to call my cat home if I, he was knocking at the door, so I had to go let my cat in. But my mother had an old school bell that she used to ring. They'd throw us out the door in the morning and that bell would ring and we know it was time to come home. Everybody needs a bell. Let's bid on these items on the Pat Conroy Center, because I just looked at it, you guys, amazing things what you all have donated. And I love the story behind the story on what you have donated. And I love you, Shari Stauch. We're sending everybody to your page to buy the books. Buy these books. They are our books of the